welcome to Kinship Connects, a podcast from SDA Kinship. We invite you to join us today as we share our stories and our journeys. My name is Floyd Pönitz, and today it is my great privilege to speak with the distinguished Pastor Todd Leonard. Thank you for joining us today, Todd. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for describing me better than I deserve, Floyd. It's really good to be with you.
Thank you. Well, we've known each other for a while now, and so I've been looking forward to this interview. I think it is a great story to share with our members. And but before we get into the history part, just give me an introduction for where you are, who you are, what you're doing right now.
So I've been an Adventist pastor now for about 23 years, and currently pastoring at the Glendale City Church of Seventh-day Adventist here in the Los Angeles area. And I've been pastor of this church now for over 9 years. And I am almost at my 25th anniversary of marriage with my wife, Robin. And I have 3 daughters who two are college age and one is a junior in high school. And so it's my family background, and I'm looking forward to the next stage of life with my wife as we kind of move into that empty nest thing. And
empty nest. Well, yeah. How do you get in a word edgewise with 4 females in the household there?
There's a lot of drama, and so I just I'm just I don't have any hair, obviously, so that says a lot.
So you can't pull it out, huh?
Right. I self-medicate through ice cream, and that's how I've managed so far.
What's your favorite flavor?
Well, and this is being where I am, I can't get it hardly at all, but black raspberry ice cream is the best ice cream in the world, but you can't get it in many parts of the country. Other than that, pralines and cream from Baskin-Robbins is a great flavor. Caramel pecans, French vanilla ice cream. Yeah.
Cool. Very good. So sounds good. Yeah.
That's what I go to when I'm about to lose it.
Well, that's good. I'll have to try that black raspberry you said, right?
Yeah, if you can find it. Yeah. Good stuff.
I'll look for it. Yeah. Sounds good. Well, let's go back in history just a little bit. And get some connections here. So where did you grow up? What part of the country?
Moved around a little bit growing up, but I can say my home base where I was born till I was 10 years old was Elmira, New York, which is upstate New York, kind of near the Pennsylvania border, and then moved a couple places out west with my dad's job, and then resettled near Atlanta, Georgia, and finished growing up there, and attended Southern Adventist University, and then did my master's degree at Andrews at the seminary. So it's kind of my...
So moving around keeps you from having an accent, a specific accent.
Yeah, I didn't pick up a lot from the South, but, y'all is a great word that I think everybody should use, even though I've gotten out of the habit of using it. Y'all is a great word.
It just feels good. Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of Adventist institutions there. Did you grow up being Adventist, or did your family, where do you fall in the pedigree of Adventism there?
Yeah, I guess I would be considered second generation on my dad's side. My dad's family became Adventist when he was a little kid, and my mom's family might be third generation on her side. So they brought me up very, very Adventist, church every week, Adventist schools, at elementary through seminary. So I'm dyed in the wool.
Great. Yeah. Did you always want to be a pastor, or how did that come about?
It came about in high school. I kind of had some mystical moments in my junior and senior year of high school where I really felt like what I had wanted to do, which is be an architect. I kind of had some moments where I felt like God had different plans for me. much farther down the road, I realized that God can use you in a whole lot of professions, that you don't have to be a pastor to be the hands and feet of Jesus in the world. And so I look back on those moments now and wish I had somebody who could say, God is calling you to do good in the world, and you can be an architect as well. But I sense that at that time that I should do pastoring, and I think I think I do have a skill set where I've done well as pastoring, but it's certainly anybody who's done the job of pastoring will tell you it's not for the faint of heart, and it has its battle scars. So
you have to love people.
You you do. So it's So it was something where I really felt compelled to go into it, and made the decision my senior year in high school. And pretty much felt comfortable with that, and didn't start second guessing myself until I'd been in pastoring for a few years.
Yeah. So you went to Southern, and then from Southern directly to Andrews.
Yeah. And then pastored in Georgia and Tennessee for the first 11 years that I was a pastor, and then came out to Los Angeles and pretty much for most of that time at Glendale City.
Cool. So one of the questions that I ask a lot of my interviewees is, when did you discover you were different? So I'm going to turn the tables and ask you, when did you realize that you're heterosexual?
That is such a great question. That's awesome. And you
weren't expecting that one.
No, I was. Boy, that's such a great question. And of course, whenever somebody says it's a great question, it means you are not going to get as good of an answer. I think I am so grateful for my getting to know and becoming friends with so many people in the LGBTQ community over the last 14, 15 years now, that I understand my sexuality, my orientation, my gender identity so much better now through my relationships with my friends who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, transgender, because they have gone through so much processing of their journey, that as they tell me their stories, it helps me. It actually does help me think through my story, and it helps me grow. And so I guess, to answer your question, I have become much more deeply aware and understanding of my own journey and gender identity, sexual orientation, now that I'm in relationship with so many and have a number of friendships with LGBTQ people. So I would say then that would be 2007 and 8, 9, where that really starts to take on a whole new trajectory for me.
Before that, it was just something that was, and you never really
didn't have to question it. Just like I don't have to question my whiteness, until I start having friends of different racial backgrounds and cultural backgrounds, that I have to start asking myself, what is my identity in regards to my race, and what does that bring with it in regards to people of other races, until I start not assuming that I'm the norm. You don't think about things. So once you start breaking out of that thing of I'm the norm and everybody else is the outlier, and start saying, no, there is this whole wonderful mix of people of all, and everybody's on the spectrum of race and orientation and gender, and we're all over the place, and we're all bouncing and feeding and learning off of each other, and all ministering to each other from these different perspectives. Then you start saying, okay, now I can do a lot more self-reflection, and then appreciate what others bring to you from their perspectives, their own unique identities.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm about to set the stage for how we met. But before I do that, you said you were pastoring there in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah. And did you consciously know of anybody who was LGBTQ before we met?
Before you met, so before I met the person that you're going to introduce in a minute in our that helped us meet each other, I was a pastor up in Tennessee and up in Appalachia country, northeast corner of Tennessee in Bristol, Tennessee. And in that church, I became aware over the course of the 3+ years I was there that either attending my congregation or related to somebody attending my congregation was someone who identified as bisexual, or even if they didn't admit to that, they would say that they had attractions to both genders, even if they would say that was sinful and that they felt it was wrong and they needed to get a handle on it. We would say they were bisexual. And then there was a person who was a closeted gay man. I think he was probably in his 70s. And then another person who he never said, and I don't know that my best guess, and again, I'm reflecting on a time when I was very naive and ignorant, and so I'm looking back on this now from a much more educated place, and I'm using my best guessing, right, because I didn't even know how to really engage in conversation and dialogue at that time, but that perhaps this person was genderqueer. And so learning their stories and learning their heartache and their separateness that they felt because of who they were and their attractions or their identities, and I just, with each one of them, my theology of the time was, I hate what sin had done to them because I saw those things as an effect of sin at that time. I didn't see it as it was the church's fault for calling it sin. But at the same time as my theology was naming their attractions as sin, my heart ached for them because I knew they needed community and they needed to know they were loved. And so I had this inner tension of seeing these people's loneliness and their longing to know they were loved by God, and feeling anguish over the fact that they didn't feel that love, and they felt this internal boundary and separateness from the church community and from God, and I didn't know how to address it at that time because of where my theology was. But I wanted them at church. I didn't know what would happen if they were actually to come out at church, or they wanted to take steps towards baptism or anything more than that. I just knew, I felt like I wanted them there. And so that became the beginning of my tension of my I got real flesh and blood people who need God and need church, and I got a theology that says that really makes it hard for that to happen. And
right.
And I'm a pastor who's trying to teach right theology and minister to people where they're at, and I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
And so that I carry that tension as I move from, as I tried to minister there, and then as I moved on to my next district, which is down near Atlanta, Georgia, after that.
Mm-hmm. So that was like the quintessential love the sinner, hate the sin.
Yeah.
Not sure how to really deal with it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, the dilemma. Well, what did the seminary teach you on how to deal with these issues?
Yeah, absolutely nothing. It was just, everybody knew it was a sin, and there's really not, and I mean, the basic understanding was it's just, though it's so rare, homosexuality is so rare, and and then if and you can just got to make sure you raise people right. It's just poor environments, all that stuff that people with absolutely no understanding of the subject say. And so there really wasn't any need to talk about it. It's just, so we didn't talk about it. There was no education, no training.
With any luck, you will never have to experience this kind of thing in your congregation, probably.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's still somewhat the case today, or pretty often at least. Yeah.
I think so. And so let me be clear about this. Not that, I think your podcast will probably be listened to by people who are quite sympathetic, but in case somebody who's ignorant on this subject, let me remind you where I met these folks. This wasn't in Los Angeles. This wasn't in New York City. This wasn't in Atlanta. This was in Appalachia. This is in rural backwater Appalachia. I met 3 people who were somewhere in the LGBTQ alphabet. And so if you think this is just in certain pockets of the great urban America, no, this is in Appalachia, where I encounter not just 1, but 3. That's
pretty mind-blowing. I mean, a lot of people do think, LA, San Francisco, New York, those are the places where those queer folk gather.
Right.
And it would never happen in Appalachia or someplace else. But yeah, great. So let's fast forward to 2010. Is that, do I have the right year?
Yep.
And let me just set a little bit of the what was going on there. So this was the year of the General Conference, and Floyd loves a General Conference. I got hooked on it back many years ago, and so I love this. You have tens of thousands of Adventists from all over the world coming together. You have all these cultures. You have the exhibit booths. I just, I'm in my element when I'm at General Conference, because I don't have to do any of the business stuff. I can just be a gawker and enjoy it. And so Carol Grady had a ministry for parents, someone to talk to. And so I had done booths with her at previous General Conferences. And, somehow that got nixed, and we no longer were able to have a booth in the exhibit hall. But Spectrum was very sympathetic, and that year in Atlanta they had a booth where they had various ministries that they sort of supported and were kind of under the umbrella of Spectrum. So they told Carol, come and have one of our little tables here in our booth. And then we got there, and it was Carol Grady, Dave Ferguson, and myself, me. We were there. We were going to help man the booth. But we were told that if we were a part of the booth, Spectrum would not be permitted to actually have their booth there.
Wow.
So that was quite a gear shift. What do we do now? We're here. We want to be able to talk to people. So we came up with this idea of having a survey. And we weren't actually in the booth. We were standing out near the booth. And we had like 15 questions or so, everything from what do you think of women's ordination to should homosexuals be allowed in the church? Should homosexuals be able to marry? Should Adventists bear arms? What do we do with the ecology, green kind of thing? Mm-hmm. And so that was a good way of talking to people, getting conversations going. And so Carol and Dave and I took turns walking around in front of the booth with our little clipboard, and we'd stop and ask people. And I just love it, because I love talking to people. And you can always know when they're coming towards you if they're going to be agreeable to this, or if they're already in a bad mood, or what. And this very sweet little old lady came walking down the aisle, and I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll approach her." So I started asking the questions, and as soon as I got to the question about homosexuality, she looked around. She said, "Are you gay?" And I went, "Yeah." And she said, "There are actually gay Adventists, and there's an organization." And I started talking about SDA Kinship, hoping that she wasn't a spy from somebody and going to turn us in or doing whatever. But I could see that there were tears forming in her eyes, tears of joy. And she said, "My daughter is lesbian, and this is just the most wonderful news I've ever had or heard." And yeah, I do want to say her name. It was Mary Green, and she was a dear lady, and she did the survey, and she gave us a big hug, and she said, "I need to go and tell my pastor about this." And I was like, "Okay." Exactly where is this going to lead? And I said, "Okay, that's great. Blessings, God be with you. We'll see you later," thinking that she probably would not show up again. No idea about that. And then either the next day or 2 days, I can't remember exactly how much time had passed, here she came with this younger guy with her. And do you want to pick up the story from there?
Well, this is interesting. So did we meet in person or did we talk by phone?
Oh, see, that I don't remember if we did phone first, but you did show up there.
Okay. All right. So I remember that she had called me and she said, "I want you to talk to this man that I met." And
right.
And she said they have this whole ministry for LGBT for gay Adventists, and so I think I talked to you, and then I think you invited me because I think Kinship camp meeting that year was also in Atlanta.
Right. And maybe your memory is better than mine that we actually met at camp meeting then.
Yeah, because I know that's where we may have met there. And I came with Mary. Mary and I went together to camp meeting that summer.
Camp meeting. Yeah.
And she was so excited that she had met you, and she was so excited to connect me with you, because she and I had met with her and Joe, her husband, in their home, and had her and her husband kind of helped me put the final pieces in place. I would say between her and her husband, they put the last few pieces in place, and then I think Kinship helped me look at the whole picture at Kinship camp meeting that summer. And because it was in their home when I would visit with them, and they would talk about their relationship with their daughter, and how normal it was, and how normal she was, and how she was married, and how they had a daughter together. And then I got the chance over the years to get to know their daughter and her family, and to love them. I mean, they're great. I mean, they weren't weird. They weren't odd. They weren't perverts. They weren't, all that stuff that you're warned about. I mean, it's so ordinary, wonderful, normal people. Yeah. And so it's just seeing both Mary and Joe in their relationship to her as their daughter and her wife. And I don't know that Mary and Joe had completely worked through all the theology or anything. They were just in the place of, we're going to love our daughter no matter what, and we're going to love her family no matter what. We're in this with them all the way. And so, me seeing that, and then coming to Kinship camp meeting, and at that point, as I was starting to wrestle with those things, I felt like I was wondering how much of an Adventist I was, and then coming into Kinship camp meeting and being around, 50, 75 LGBT Adventists who are much more Adventist than me. I mean, very, very devoted to the faith, very much love the church, love the hymns, love the traditions, love the haystacks, love everything about our faith and the culture, and just want to belong. It helped. It just, and sitting there next to Mary, and Mary just taking it all in as well, and just seeing, why can't this just be normal? Why is this so? Why does this have to be so unusual and not known and hidden? And this is so beautiful, and this is so right. And I think it was so cathartic for Mary, and it was, and it brought me to a place where I could never go back to the way I was after that. And I got to meet Deneen Akers and Stephen Heyer. They were there and talking about their film that the Seventh-day Adventist said they were about to release in the next year or so. And so it was. I felt like this was, things were happening, and that my coming to conviction that I needed to start talking about this, and these Mary's meeting with you and Dave and Carol, and then my getting acquainted with you. It just felt like the God was leading in this, and that I need, as much as I felt called to be a pastor back in high school, I felt like it was time for me to, take a step out and start talking about this as an Adventist pastor as well. And so that became a very pivotal moment for my life because of Mary meeting you guys at General Conference and introducing me to you, and then she and I coming to Kinship Camp meeting. My life was so different since the summer of 2010.
You had no idea before then.
I had no idea.
Yeah, for Mary, it was like a time where she was able to actually put the two most precious things in her life together and marry them. Her family, her daughter, and what that represented, and her faith and love for Adventism. That was really a special time. And then for you, probably that was the first time you were in the minority in a Adventist gathering like that.
Yeah, it was, but so cool. I mean, and I know so many people have said this, those who've had the privilege of being at Kinship Camp meeting, there's nothing more moving than communion at Kinship Camp meeting, where so many people feel like they can't be who they are at the communion table at a normal Adventist church, but at Kinship Camp meeting, you come to the table fully as you are. Right. And for me, it was one of the most liberating experiences for me, because I felt like, for me, it was like, this is truly the open table. This is truly Christ welcoming everybody to the table. And it was, for me, the most welcoming table I've ever sat at, is when I've been at the table at Kinship Camp meeting. It's just profound and moving.
I definitely think God's hand was in all of these events that happened there. So, okay, we had GC, then we had camp meeting, then life goes kind of back to normal, which is always, after the high comes the low.
Right.
And, the kind of the letdown. And, then kind of what happened after that? I mean, it was a couple years.
Yeah.
Before you got a call to come to California?
Yeah. And in those couple of years, come to find out, not everybody was as excited to hear what I had to say about LGBT as I was. Surprise. Can you believe it? I was like one of those new converts who just felt like, now that I had figured it out, everybody else would be ready to just jump right on board with me. And of course not. That wasn't the case. And so I didn't know, what is my future? Can I be an Adventist pastor, feeling this way, when clearly coming to this conviction just puts me further and further outside of the norm within as an Adventist pastor. But
did you get some pushback there at that church? Or
not at my church. I was fortunate to be in two newer churches that had just started that had younger demographics that were not necessarily sure about things, but had enough people that understood where I was coming from, and I had been with those groups long enough that they didn't push me away. But yeah, I mean, the conference started to get some complaints when some people who had attended heard me say things or something, and the conference got concerned because there weren't going to be any other churches that wanted me when they needed to move me somewhere. So it became just more uncomfortable, and I could see just logistically it was going to be harder. But I became very fortunate through a mutual friend. I was introduced to a pastor here in LA who was looking for a young adult pastor at another Adventist church in Glendale, the Vallejo Drive Church, and they gave me a shot. And I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. Maybe there's more openness in LA. And at that point, I had heard of that Glendale City Church was a more welcoming congregation, that they had actually were intentionally trying to welcome. So I said, maybe if there's a church like Glendale City, maybe some other churches are thinking that way too, so maybe I would be okay. And Vallejo Drive, there was more openness there than I sensed in churches back in the East, and then all I can say is I'm glad that between Glendale City, when they were looking for a new pastor in 2012, that a couple of pastors turned them down, and then they were not satisfied with a number of pastors that they interviewed. So I was like 7th or 8th choice, but they got around to me, and even after they got to me, they looked around a little more to see if they could find somebody better, and they couldn't. So they finally settled on me, and thank God I'm at Glendale City Church.
I think you were God's first choice. Well, it was just that they weren't catching up with that, taking the hint. So they had a...
Not sure about that. I'm not sure. But man, it's just, there's been so much good work done here by the members and previous pastors. There's just so many amazing stories that have already happened in this church that for me to come in here, it wasn't like I had to come in and do a lot of work. I just got to move along with the story that was already happening here, which has just been wonderful.
Yeah. So you've been there now for 10 years, is that right?
Almost 10 years. It'll be 10.
Almost 10 years.
Fall. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Time goes by very quickly.
I know.
Yeah, so Glendale City had a long history of accepting LGBTQ people who came to church there. Mm-hmm. There was the famous pink pew that I know I had always heard about when I first came to Kinship many, many years ago. There was the rumors of the pink pew there at Glendale City. And then when I went there, my first time, this was long before you got there, but, I kept looking for this pink pew. But at some point, it was quite obvious which one was considered the pink pew.
Right.
And so I joined the seating there.
Yeah.
But, So what are some of the outreach programs that, what makes Glendale City special, especially for the LGBT community?
Yeah, I mean, it was, the stories of how, many of the stories of how it got started, there was just, I think, early on back in the 80s, it was, the pastors were willing to do funerals for men dying of AIDS when most churches in Glendale wouldn't do it. Glendale is this weird town near LA that was really fighting to stay traditional as other parts of Los Angeles were progressing and moving forward. And there weren't a lot of churches that were willing to touch the AIDS thing when it first broke out. And so an Adventist church in Glendale was at the forefront of ministering to families of of men who were dying from AIDS. And, that became such an important ministry early on. And it started to open the eyes of this church to the need for compassion. Even if even theologically, they weren't ready to come to a place of affirming. Compassion was already moving in the church. Mm-hmm. And then that whole pink pew myth and experience was the gay guys who would start coming to church because they knew this church had been so good over the years of caring for families of men who had AIDS. And they would start coming, and then the old church ladies who would just, love on these guys and take them to lunch afterwards. And it just became, and again, these old women who didn't understand, never dreamed they would be, but just loved these guys. And it just became this beautiful thing that evolved, and people just start asking the same questions that everybody asks once they start to get to know people who are different from them. They say, why do they have to be other from me? Why am I questioning whether or not God accepts them when now that I know them, they're like my own family, they're my own best friends, and if I can accept them, then why wouldn't God accept them? And it's that whole journey that this church has been on now for going on 40 years. And so it's been so much of that informal stuff that's happened, of just a lot of Sabbath lunches together and hanging out after church and talking and hugging and stuff like that. That's done so much of that work. But we've had a kinship chapter that's not quite as active at the moment, but for a long time was very active on our campus. The people would get together for social events and for Sabbath lunches. And so there was always a great place to connect socially. More recently, we've been have a great working relationship with the local Pride organization that started in Glendale about 5 years ago, Glendale Out. And we have 2 or 3 of our church members who are active leaders in Glendale Out and doing programs in the community on that, which in our city, again, with it being this traditional city, we have a couple large ethnic groups that traditionally are not accepting of LGBTQ people. And so there actually is a lot of work in this city of education and helping people break down the stereotypes and the barriers that keep them fearful and keeping LGBTQ people at arm's length, or denying that there are LGBTQ people in their own cultural groups. And and so it's not just a group trying to have a Pride event every June, which is part of what they do, but it really is, it's really doing some important work in our city. In fact, tomorrow night having a symposium for a specific ethnic group on recognizing, the cultural heritage of LGBTQ people in their culture. Wow. So some important work that our members are involved in, and that they support our church and what we're doing. We support their work and what they're doing in the community. And so that's some of the more recent stuff that we've been involved in.
Right. As an Adventist, when coming out, realizing that I'm gay and actually accepting that word, that term for me, that label, and then hearing that there was a church, Glendale City Church, where I would be welcome, was just, that meant the world. Yeah. It's like there is hope there. So are there any other churches in Southern California where a gay couple could go, or a gay person could go and be accepted and welcomed?
There are, and thankfully that, there is becoming slowly, but I've become aware of congregations they're happening. For a number of years now, the Hollywood Adventist Church has been a welcoming congregation, a safe space. And they have people in leadership who identify as gay or transgender or queer. I know that, and they are our congregation is demographically a little bit older as a whole, and their congregation is demographically a little bit younger. And so they've been a safe space for, I would say, going on 20 years now, of being a place where people would be welcome. The La Sierra University Church has a kinship Sabbath school. I mean, you've probably talked about that on your podcast already. So La Sierra, the University Campus Church, has become more welcoming. I can say that those three congregations are intentional. And then there are other congregations that I probably won't name because they don't go on the record as saying they're intentional, but pastors and leadership have always made sure that if they recognize or get to know somebody who comes out to them, that they say, "Oh, I want you to know that I have your back, you're welcome here, and that you have a lot of sympathetic members here, that you're welcome here. We don't talk a lot about it here, but you're welcome here." So there's a number of don't ask, don't tell congregations, and I'm not satisfied with that, and I would tell those congregations, let's keep moving forward. But for when you know the culture of Adventism as a whole, and know that you could walk into another handful of congregations here in LA, and you would know the pastor is personally is affirming, and that you would be welcome, and the pastor would stick up for you is progress.
The needle is moving.
Yes.
And that's encouraging. That's very encouraging. So a lot of people have come to me and said, okay, my pastor just found out I'm gay. He's going to go to the board, and they're going to expose me to the church, and I'm going to be disfellowshipped. Yep. Would that happen at your church?
Would never happen. And in fact, what happens at our church is if that happens to you, you call us, and we'll immediately we'll request that you become a member of our church. We have, I think, well over 100 members of our church from around the country and around the world, who, because their congregation found out, or you came out to your congregation, and they, instead of welcoming that, decided to disfellowship you. We've had a number of people become members of our church. We've also had allies, just people who felt like I can't be a member of a church that wouldn't welcome LGBTQ people. I care about I'm an Adventist. I'm going to be an Adventist my whole life. I'd at least like to be a member of a congregation that I know would welcome LGBTQ people. And so we have allies who have chosen to be members. Straight allies is what I meant to say. Straight allies to be members of our congregation as well.
Even some pastors, I think.
Absolutely. That happened as well.
So Glendale City Church is a safe haven for anyone who wants to keep their membership on the books, kind of thing. Now, doesn't that skew your needs of whatever that for the conference or whatever?
Who knows? I mean, we're
that's not your concern, right?
Not our concern. This is for us. It's such a privilege. I mean, because we know. I mean, this is it. It is. I can't tell you. I mean, and listen. Here's the thing: is some people will look at this and say, "Wow, that's got to be the most amazing church in the world." And the bottom line is, we're still a church of humans who get on each other's nerves. And I'm not the perfect pastor. I let people down all the time. I mean, so we're still an ordinary Adventist church. Don't get me wrong. We're not perfect, but that we can do this and it be something that matters and gives hope to people is something that is so important to us. And so, if it means our insurance rate is a little bit higher because we carry a few more members on our books who will never actually make it to sit in our pink pews, that's okay. It's okay. I mean, because it means if it would mean something to you, it matters a great deal to us. So
that is awesome. That is awesome. And it means a whole lot to the gay community, the queer community, and to SDA Kinship that you exist. So yeah. Yeah, no, we appreciate you. We appreciate your leadership there, and just feel very comfortable, with Glendale City. So a big thanks. I really think that, God does move and put people in different places. And I think he knew that you needed to be at Glendale at a certain point. And so he put things in place to get you there. And even if Mary hadn't come by, I think God would still have done something to get you over to Glendale. But I think, and I'm very thankful for Mary Green and for, that you were open and coming to camp meeting, and just the whole journey, I think is providence, that God was leading there. So,
well, and again, I don't, whether or not, whatever benefit I've been to anybody, the blessing to me, geez, I mean, I can't tell you how much my life has been made better by this whole journey. I mean, there's been stresses along the way, but so many beautiful friendships and so much joy that's come into my life because of Mary's meeting you and Dave and Carol that summer. I'm so grateful for that serendipitous moment.
If there's someone listening that is contemplating coming out or having struggles or whatever, what advice or what would you tell them to do?
I mean, you make sure, obviously, you find, if you don't have a good support system, you want to find somebody good that you can trust, that you can come out to, and somebody who's going to cheer you on and encourage you. And but you are coming to accept who you are and understanding that you are created in the image of God is so important, and to not continue to run from that. You are part of the magnificent diversity that God has created to beautify this world and to reveal God's glory, and don't run from that. Come out and come to your fullness of who God has made you to be, and help and find good people to help you. You may not be able to find that in an Adventist church. Obviously, reach out to Floyd and those at SDA Kinship who can provide that support. We at Glendale City, our pastoral staff is happy to spend some time with you by phone and by Zoom if you're not local, to meet with you. We're happy to do that as well. And certainly your local LGBTQ centers and things like that, great places to help you on that journey and resource you. I mean, just don't let bad church theology keep you from becoming everything that God has made you to be. You are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Amen. That is very true. Very, very reassuring and affirming. So if someone wants to get in touch with you or with Glendale City, is there a contact or a web page, or do you guys do Zooming services?
We do.
So how do we find you?
So our website is glendalecitychurch.org. And then from there, you can go to the staff page and you can email me. We're fortunate to have on staff a couple other pastors who I can affirm and elevate. I especially encourage you. Leif Lind would be a great person who also would very much be able to be a great support if you wanted to meet with him, and our other pastors as well. And then our phone number, which you can get to any of the pastors through our directory, is 818-244-7241. And so, please reach out to us, and we will certainly make time to set up phone or Zoom appointments and be happy to get acquainted with you and spend more time together. And let me say this before Floyd wraps up. I just have to say that the work that Floyd does, Floyd needs to know that I consider him a colleague, a pastoral colleague in the work that you do through Kinship. And Floyd is such a great person, such a minister for Christ in his role at Kinship, and you have somebody great to reach out to along with his staff. Just so many wonderful people who have a heart for you, that I'm just a deep admiration and appreciation for what Floyd does.
Thanks, Todd. I appreciate that. You are definitely loved and respected, and I know your position is not always easy, and but we're there carrying you as much as we can.
Thank you.
So we appreciate you. So, any other final words?
I've just enjoyed this. Thanks for inviting me on.
It's been a privilege to connect with you. Always is. So, and I'm sure our audience will enjoy that. So, I want to thank you, Todd. Thanks for sharing with us today, and we hope that today's podcast was interesting and has given our listeners some things to think about. Seventh-day Adventist Kinship is the only LGBTQIA plus affirming community for current and former Seventh-day Adventist, and we welcome not only the Rainbow Alphabet members, but also parents and family members who want to learn more about how to support their loved ones. And of course, the supportive allies who stand with us to make a difference in our church and our world. I hope you do check out Glendale City Church. It's a wonderful community. If you're not local, check it out online, join them for worship service. And you can check out SDA Kinship on the web, sdakinship.org, or follow us on social media at SDA Kinship. If you have any questions, you can always email me, info@sdakinship.org. And we look forward to having you join us on another podcast release. Thanks a lot for being with us today, and have a wonderful day. And remember that God loves you unconditionally.